Hello and welcome back to the Animal Communicator and Healer Summit. I'm your host, Dr. Kara Gubbins, professional animal communicator, best-selling author of over a dozen books, including The Confident Animal Communicator, and founder of the Animal Communicator Academy, a 10-module program that walks you through the complete transformation from aspiring to successful animal communicator. From foundational exercises to advanced techniques, the Animal Communicator Academy is packed with everything you need to be successful as an animal communicator. And today I have the great honor of speaking with Penelope Smith, a trailblazer in the field of animal communication. And we're going to be talking about everything is alive, everything communicates. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. So in case you don't know Penelope, Penelope Smith is an animal communication specialist and author. Communicating with animals telepathically throughout her life, Penelope discovered in 1971 that animals could be relieved of emotional traumas and other problems through the same counseling techniques that helped humans. And this began her work as an animal communicator. Her visionary work as a teacher of interspecies telepathic communication since the 1970s has helped launch the careers of numerous, I'm going to say hundreds, if not thousands, of professional animal communicators. And she wrote the popular classic books Animal Talk, When Animals Speak, and Animals in Spirit. Penelope believes that everyone is born with the power to communicate with other species, and that although it's long lost for most people, it can be regained for the benefit of all beings on Earth. And you can find Penelope online at animaltalk.net. Welcome, Penelope.
Hi, Kara. So good to be back with you again.
My smile, like we get together and I just start smiling because it's so great to connect with you, to talk with you. You always expand my mind, my heart, and I feel like you're somebody who's always in the what's possible world. And when I get to connect with somebody who's in that frame of mind, it just excites me so much. So I'm super excited to be here. And I want to make sure that we start with your story in case there's people who don't know your story. How did you become an animal communication specialist?
Okay, so I have always loved animals, and I have always communicated with them telepathically. From when I was a very young child, I communicated, and I didn't let anybody's ideas, including my mother, who drummed into me how it was all my imagination, and I was very stubborn. I didn't let anybody take it away from me. So I just kept it in the background. When kids at school made fun of me, I just kept it in the background. I said, well, it's too important to me. The animals are too important to me. My relationship with them is too important to me. I'm not letting this go. And while other people may be willing to say it doesn't exist and live a different life, I'm going to live the life where I continue to honor my animal friends and communicate with them. So when I was young, I didn't know that I was going to be an animal communicator when I grew up. That certainly wasn't in the radar. My path was about enlightening people, helping people to remember who they were, because I was aware that people were not aware that they were spiritual beings, and that this made life very difficult and miserable for a lot of people. So when I became a spiritual counselor for people in the early 1970s, I continued to communicate with animals again all my life. They were just my friends. I talked to them as friends, whoever they were, on the street, or my own personal companions or wild animals, whoever. I just enjoyed communicating with them. When I became a counselor for people, I discovered through a cat who was having difficulties, and I tell a complete story in Animal Talk, so I won't repeat it here. she was having difficulties. And so I just applied what I knew helped people as a spiritual counselor for people, would help people through their traumas to her. And in a very short time, it was actually really amazing to me, because people take so much longer, hours and hours of asking them questions, guiding them, helping them to open up and get past their barriers and their fears, and to get through their traumas. But with this cat, it was in a matter of 20 minutes, half an hour, we had a life-changing consequence that was obvious to everybody. Her behavior changed. She went from being a very afraid cat to being a very confident cat. She healed a wound that had been festering for a while. It was quite miraculous. And I went, wow, this has enormous potential. So this was in 1971. And then I just, on the side, again, I didn't think of it as a profession. Then on the side, just people would ask me, they discovered I could do this. I could communicate telepathically. They would ask me, well, my dog has a problem, or my bird has a problem, or whatever. And I would just do this. And so it was sort of in the beginning, it was my practice time to see what would happen and to learn how animals respond. And then I also saw the miraculous change that happened with people, that people became more aware, that they opened up to who animals were as spiritual beings. They also opened up to themselves more. So it started rolling, and eventually after a few years, I started charging for it, and then people asked me to teach them. And so I did my first class in animal communication in the 70s. And then I just spoke to every group, cat group, horse group, dog group, you name it, on radio, TV. I was on a lot of radio stations. And it just started rolling until eventually it took over from my other professions. I was doing other things at the time, and eventually it took over. So that's how I became an animal communicator, and really jump-started the profession. There were only a few other people who I knew of at the time and in the world. And we were all kind of focused in California. And I knew of them. And I focused on the teaching. I focused on empowering other people. That was my big thing, was education. Not so much, again, I did thousands and thousands of consultations, but educating people was my number one thing. Reaching them, telling them what it's about, helping them to communicate with animals, helping them to open up. So that's how it all started for me.
Wow, it's such a great story and so inspiring. I love that it was so natural for you to just talk to animals the same way that you did your clients, and that it just really opened things up. Again, like that word possibility keeps coming up, right? Like the possibility, the potential, all of that. So over all these years, I feel like you've probably come to another place of understanding that not only is animal communication possible, but everything communication is possible, which is our topic. Everything's alive, everything communicates. What does that mean to you?
Well, this is an indigenous expression. Everything is alive, everything communicates. And you probably know, as many people do, that indigenous peoples around the world, and which are our ancestors of long ago in many cases, realize that everything is alive and everything communicates. So they regard, these are still indigenous people now in Amazon and Australia, all over in different parts of the world that still practice this, that you can communicate with animals, you can communicate with trees, you can communicate with places. Everything is alive. The rivers are alive, the waters are alive. They are all beings. Obviously, Mother Earth is a being, and there are spirits everywhere. So let's take a look at that, because this was also pre-Christian, what was called pagan religions also had the same thing. And in earlier spiritualities and in the Vedic traditions, they have the same thing, that there are spirits of places that you can communicate and should communicate and better communicate with all these other beings, and that everything is alive, everything communicates. So I explored this in my life. I mean, when I was young, I mostly communicated with animals and plants, with trees. And but very soon it was very real to me that everything had a spirit. I could feel the energies as I moved around. I could feel the energies of different places, and they would communicate with me. So I would say that this is our ancestry, that all of us come from this place. This is a shamanic teaching of today, and that goes back many, many thousands of years. And it percolates through all the major spiritualities, major religions, that beings are alive, and you need to acknowledge that. But our society, our modern society, has lost this in materialism. And so people have gone from that animals don't feel and think and communicate, excuse me, and that plants are not even sentient beings. And obviously nothing else is, it's just things. Everything is things. But the Descartes view was it's all things. Animals are things, it's all mechanistic. The mechanistic view just cut everybody off. And the consequences we are seeing now, cut off from the rest of creation, from the rest of nature, considering that we're not even part of nature. We get sick, we get disconnected, we hurt, and we hurt everything around us. And so we actually really need this perspective. And so what I have found, and what I have taught people in my advanced communication classes, is we work with the spirits of all the places. So we work with the spirits of the mountains, we work with the rivers, places, and saw the nature spirits and got people to communicate with the nature spirits, and of course the plants and all the animals as the foundation of entry, the entry point with animals. But on many levels, it's all alive. So let's take a look at the spiritual level. Everything is animated. It moves. It's energetic. There's exchanges happening all the time throughout wherever you go. To really experience the spiritual nature of life, you see that it's all alive. There isn't anything dead or stiff or whatever people want to call it, unanimated. It's all moving. And then when we get to the physical level, if you go into advanced science, physics discoveries, they're talking about everything moving into each other, being completely connected, and being mostly space. Really, and then you start hopping back to the ancient spiritualities that says it's all an illusion. There really isn't anything there. We're just creating this perception of matter, of energy, of forms. Okay, so we can go way far out there, which the physics goes pretty far out into that. Everything is just like openness, vastness. Okay, but if you come back a little bit into our understanding, we're all composed of the same molecules, the same materials. There isn't anything that's not composed of the same thing, and the same thing happens to all beings, physical bodies. So the matter gets exchanged again and again among all bodies, plants, animals. Eating is just an exchange of energy that is necessary for life. We don't live without eating. And what is eating? It's energy forms transforming into each other. And then we have this constant, okay, bodies die. They come and they go. They go back. they dissolve, they become part of each other. So I'm breathing, all the particles I'm breathing were many bodies of, millions of years, because the matter, the particles keep circulating. So it gets into like a really moot point of how can we even conceive that we're separated and that everything is not alive? Okay, so now we can get, you get into these very theoretical kind of discussions or abstract discussions. Let's go take it down a little bit, back into our normal reality. You know how kids, before they're stopped from communicating with animals, you can't keep them away from animals. They just reach out and they know the animal is alive. They communicate, they look at the animals, they feel their energy. Well, the same thing goes for kids and in what are called inanimate objects. So how many kids know that their dollies, their little stuffed animals, or their little baby dolls are alive and communicate? They're their friends. They communicate with them. Okay, the kids know this. I knew this when I was a kid. I mean, I knew that my little elephant stuffed doll was taking care of me, and my little baby dolls, had feelings, no problem. And I still know this. So, there's conceptualizations that, okay, as you grow up, you become more differentiated, you separate, and you no longer regard yourself as one with the rest of the world. Well, if you actually stay with that spirituality of oneness, you will not lose that. You will differentiate. Yes, in the physical world, I can see that there are different objects. We agree that, there's a computer here and there's a dog over there and there's a picture on the wall, etc. And we can go with these agreements. But the fact is, let's get back to love and life again. Okay, what is the purpose of communicating with animals? Well, they're our buddies. We're walking the path with them in life. But who else are we walking the path in life with on planet Earth, without which we could not live? Okay, we've got millions, billions, trillions of small animals, microbes. We've got a gazillion plants. We could not live with any of these beings. But what else do we have? We have the rivers, we have the oceans, we have the atmosphere, all full of all kinds of life, and is life itself. Okay, so how do we know this? Okay, this is where this everything is alive, everything communicates, gets really fun. Because how do we know animal communication is true? Well, we see the results. We communicate with animals, we help to handle difficulties, the animals change, the people change, everybody changes, everybody's happier. Okay, so what happens when you communicate with plants? The same thing. So a lot of people can recognize now, before it was this division of humans were the only alive sentient thing. Okay, then finally we got back to, we were cut off from everything. We finally got back to animals again, and now plants, and people are realizing how plants all communicate with each other and they're all interconnected. But what about the rest? Okay, you can communicate with all the rest. The microbes, the little guys, the air. In fact, if you really want to live well on this earth, you will see a correlation with how well you communicate with the rivers, the hurricanes, the changes that are all around us, the wind, the spirits that are all around us, how well you communicate with them, and how happy you are, and how well your life goes for you. Let me give you a few really fun examples that I have had in my life that really showed me this, that what are called objects are also alive and communicate. So now I've pointed out how kids often recognize that their dollies are alive. that they can communicate with them and their dollies help them. Okay, there's an interchange and their dolls support them and they communicate with them. Okay, I have found that the more people communicate with dolls, the more alive the dolls become, because just like with the animals, they have an opportunity to communicate back. And so there's more spiritual energy attracted. So the more attention you give the doll, the more alive it gets. Now, this again will seem very far out to some people, but just try it. Okay, I had one example I'll give you. I walked into this bookstore, and at the bookstore also had all these wonderful stuffed animals on a shelf above the books, and I was attracted to them and wanted to look at them. And I went, well, maybe there's a doll that wants to come home with me. And this little dolphin jumped off the shelf. A dolphin doll jumped off the shelf, and I caught it. And I went, thank you. At the time I was sponsoring swimming with dolphins, communicating with dolphins, doing dolphin journeys. So it was very appropriate that this little dolphin jumped off the shelf out of all the dolls that were up there. So I took the dolphin home with me. Now, this was very obvious to me that this being, there was a being there. There was a spiritual being that I could communicate with, and that being propelled itself off the shelf into my hands, as I was kind of just looking around and probably not really going to buy any of the dolls. This doll came home. Okay, so that's one example. And again, may not seem fantastical to a lot of people and may not seem even really important, but it was a very happy thing for me. Okay, so now I'll give you a few more examples. I had a friend who he knew what I did, communicating with animals, and he accepted that, and he loved his cats. And he was a computer expert. He fixed computers. And he says, I got to tell you a little secret. I don't tell people, most people this, but why I'm so successful at my business and why I can solve all the bugs in the computer. He did software and hardware. He says, I communicate with computers. He said, a lot of times people can't find out what's going on, so they come to me. They've gone, and this way he was talking about hardware. And he said, what I do is I sit with the computer and I get in touch with the computer and I ask it what's going on. And the computer shows me, visualizes to me where the problem is. Then I go in there and I fix it and solve it for the person. So he had a very practical use of communicating with computers. He also did this with software, but his big specialty was hardware, especially the hardware that other people they couldn't handle. And these were, in the early days of computers too, and it was very difficult sometimes to get computers fixed. He was just fantastic. And I said, yep, I got it. I could see how he communicated and how the computers communicated back to him. Okay, so this is one of the most wonderful experiences in my life. All my cars that I have, I know that they're alive and there's a spirit there. And when I come to buy a car, a spirit comes and they inhabit the car and take care of me. So this was one of my first cars, and this was in the 70s, and I had an old VW. And believe me, it was old. It was all I could afford. It was a used car, and and I said, I called it Bub. That was its name. And I said, Bub, you got to take care of me. I'm going out, I'm doing consultations and driving around. I said, you got to take care of me. Please don't ever break down in a scary neighborhood, where it's dangerous. And please, if you need to break down to get something fixed, please always do it near a gas station or somewhere where I can get it easily fixed. Okay, so this is what happened. I don't know if you remember the VW Bugs, but they had their engine in the back, and mine didn't have a lock on the lid. on the hatch that you picked up for the engine. And I used to love it. You go ticky, ticky, ticky. I love that ticky, ticky sound. And you could see the engine all in there going round and round. It was so cute. Okay, so one morning I was on my way to do a consultation. I had an appointment. And I took off in Bub. And about a mile away in front of a gas station, Bub stopped. And so I went into the gas station, which had a repair shop, and I said, my VW has stopped. Can you help me? So they easily pushed the car up into the very easy to push a little VW bug into the gas station. He opened up the engine and he said, listen, lady, there's no way you could have driven this car. Your fan belt is stolen. He said, it's gone. There's no fan belt in here. He said, it's very common, and I didn't know this, and I didn't have a lock on the engine. He said, I was in Los Angeles, and he said, it's very common for people to steal the belts off these cars and other parts. He says, you really should have a lock on your engine. I didn't know anything. This is my first car. And he said to me, there's no way you could have driven. And I said, well, I did. And so he replaced the belt, which again, impossible to drive without the belt. And it didn't just fall off. There was no evidence of it just falling off. It was stolen. So we replaced the belt and away we went. And then that happened another time where Bub stopped in front of a gas station. It was some other little thing. It wasn't a stolen part this time, but it was some other little thing. But Bub always took care of me. And then when I got a new car, Bub only had a certain amount of life left in him. And when I got a new car, that spirit that was Bub transferred. I graduated to a Honda, and that spirit transferred to my new car, but we got a new name to the car. But Bub, I always felt taken care of, and all my cars, I have felt, and I have met many people who I tell this story to, and they can really relate to this. People really recognize, just like they recognize animal communication, but it's sort of in the background and nobody's talking about it. So once you talk about it, they go, oh, wow, I can do that. I've done that. Well, they have the same experience with their cars. I found this common. And other people who talk to their computers, or they say to the computer, now I need you for this, so don't break down now. And I've had those relationships. And frankly, I have very little problems with mechanical things because I don't regard them as things. Obviously things wear out, and you have to get new parts. We all have to get new parts on all our bodies. But I have very little problems, and there's always somebody right there who can help me. I wasn't very late for the appointment. It didn't take very long I called up the person, and it didn't take very long for him to replace the part, and Bub took care of me, and I was on my way and did my appointment. So I could relate other ones like that, because I also had a motorcycle that did the same thing. But these are the things that are practical. So on the practical level, if you communicate to beings around you that happen to be objects, especially ones you're close to, like I just got this new microphone that looks like R2-D2. It's a Blue Yeti. And, I look at it and I just love this microphone from the start because it looked like R2-D2 from Star Wars. And of course I'm going to communicate with them. So, I ask them, which way do I turn you? Which way is the best to have you positioned? I read the manual and everything, but I also ask the microphone. Just like I ask plants, where do you need to be planted? What's the best place for you? Is this the right time? Is this the best place? Just like I would ask an animal, I ask the microphone. Now, what's the best way for me to use you, since we're in a cooperative relationship now? So that's what I mean by everything is alive, everything communicates. And of course, indigenous peoples take it as a matter of fact that you communicate with the place that you live in, and that you talk to the oceans, and that you do rituals that connect you and keep you connected. So you stay out of your mind, and that separates you from connection, and you stay connected. Now, what would the world be like if people did this?
Well, I think that that's part of, like, the whole conversation we want to have here is this changes our perspective
Yes,
individually. When we have these experiences, we've now changed. You can't go back to not
right.
knowing. So
Right.
we're different people, which is going to then, take that energy out to everybody and everything that we do. What do you, Penelope, see as the benefits of people really communicating with everything, communicating with everything? How does it change us and how does it help the planet?
Well, let's look at individual people. A lot of our malaise, our modern day malaise, why people turn to drugs and why there's so much violence, is people are disconnected. Okay, anything that reconnects to the rest of life helps people to be happier, helps people to handle what's bugging them, helps them to feel not isolated anymore. So again, this isn't just, oh, I'm doing a little mind trick on myself that I'm connected, or no, this is actual connection, so that you walk in a softer, gentler way. You walk around, you see, just like with the animals, you see the baby bunnies, I'm walking around, I see the snakes, I communicate with them, even with snakes that are considered dangerous, like the rattlesnakes. How can we relate well to each other? What are you doing here? How can I help you? How can we relate to each other? So we do that with our, in quotes, objects. And we do that with the rivers. We do that with our land. We do that with our apartments, our houses. What happens to us? We become more alive. Guess what? We are now taking parts of ourselves that have been disowned. See, all the animals, all the life forms on the planet are parts of us. We are united. We are this giant being, all floating together. And now that we are friends with these other beings that are part of us, as we become more friends with animals, become more friends with fellow humans, become more friends with the plants, become more friends with our computer, with things we might have felt alienated from before. Like people say, oh, I hate machines. I just go, okay, guess what's going to happen? The more you hate, the more you disconnect, the more problems you have with the thing that you disconnected from, the thing you're calling that you hate. Okay, when you love it, when you love your little blue Yeti, and you love your computer, and you love your car, and you treat them as fellow beings, and you shine them up, and you find out what they need to feel good, and how you can relate to each other, guess what happens? Life just gets better. It just gets better. So what's the need for disconnecting? What's the need for the drugs? What's the need for the violence? Okay, there isn't. Life gets softer and gentler and more meaningful. And yes, there's a lot of things going around us. How can we communicate with them? How can we communicate with the consequences of climate change? How can we communicate with all that's around us? If we don't communicate, we become fearful. We become disconnected, and we become fearful of that microbe, that virus. We become fearful of that labeled disease. We become fearful of that big wind or big water. And if we can relate to it and relate to our part in it, then we can live a different life. I'm not saying there aren't survival things that we have to do. Obviously, we have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to have a home, we have to have shelter from the elements. All these things animals have to have, including human animals and plants. And, we have to live in our habitat. And we can live in a better way. So, animals sort of take it for granted. They just live in this sort of connected way. and don't get this separation into abstract thinking, that pulls us away. They're into feeling, okay, what am I doing here as this animal? What am I doing here as this plant? What is my function? How do I relate? How do my juices flow with the other plants? How do my energies relate to the other animals around me, whether it's for survival or whether it's for enjoyment? And the same thing goes with what we call inanimate objects. So when we relate this way, we walk in a different way in the planet. The planet becomes better. You certainly can't do the kind of poisoning and violence that happens when you operate out of greed and fear. When you operate on how much can I take, then there's consequences. When you operate on how much can I relate, have a relational quality with everything around you instead of the quantity of how much am I going to get, then the planet gets better. Things around you get better. I just find again, we all have our lessons on our journey. We all have our spiritual journeys and things that we need to learn in this life that we set up for ourselves. And so you have to relate to what's around you. You experience what's here on the planet, the fires, the floods, everything else. And you can relate to it in a way where it's more harmonious for you. It's more fruitful. You have more richness with it. So yes, it can be a lot to endure. Yes, it can be huge challenges living on the earth for anybody. We all have things we have to face, and we can do it in a way that we grow and everything around us grows. It's just by osmosis, just like you said. As you grow, it spreads. It's osmosis. It's why people want to sit with teachers. People used to just say to me, well, I just like sitting around you. I just feel better. I just understand things better. It just spreads. It just spreads. And so if we can spread this kind of connection and smile at the hurricane, well, it's a big one, I know, or smile at the fire and the flood at the same time as we're doing our physical necessary survival things to handle and be realistic about our bodies and what we need to survive. But can we relate? Can we learn? Can we get the fruits of this labor of being on earth and growing? And can we help everybody else in the process? What I feel around me, there's this harmony. The animals, the plants know, the objects know, what we call objects. They know I'm not going to just smash them. I'm not going to just trundle all over them. We live in a harmony. Even when objects have finished their life, recycling is the more harmonious way, or passing them on to somebody who can use them is a more harmonious way than just junking them and poisoning the planet. So again, this affects what we do. It affects how we relate. We relate to everything as an alive being and communicate with it. And boy, it's fun.
You're making it look really fun.
It's been fun for me. And again, when I've done exercises with my students, they just get into it. People just have so much fun. They just expand. They get rid of, a lot of their burdens and uptightness, and all of, like I said, spiritual growth is really about relaxing. You shed another burden, you shed another anxiety, another uptightness, something you're holding on to, and you relax more. And you relax more, you include more. Things don't bother you the same way. We're all growing, obviously, we're all getting through our uptightnesses. And as we do, it just becomes more fun to live. And the planet appreciates it. everything is alive, everything communicates. These spirits of places, the mountains, the rivers, they appreciate it. Mother Earth appreciates it. When we communicate, it is all, the appreciation is multiplied. You feel, see, when we start relating, we start to feel what's coming from those other beings. If we don't relate, if we just cut off, we don't feel that the plants are always loving us, the planets too. The planets are always loving us. The stars are loving us. We don't feel the love. We don't feel it. But when we start to open up our sensitivity, we feel surrounded by it. We feel like, okay, it's not a hostile world. Yes, I know there's so many things going on, but how are you going to juggle this? Are you going to stay as much as possible in this relational openness of communicating and growing? Or are you going to go into the uptightness? It's a choice. So I'm into the expansion, letting go of the uptightness and communicating more.
I love the phrase that you used, how much can I relate versus how much can I take? And I think that's the key mindset shift, that when people go into that, how much can I relate? It really opens up all these possibilities, all this potential. It shifts your energy, it shifts the energy of everything that you interact with. And then it changes outcomes, and then it changes trajectories, and then it changes the future. We're going to talk more in your bonus interview about how to communicate with all life. But for now, do you have any final words or messages that you want to share with our viewers?
I say to people, just try it. Expand what you already know about communicating with animals, because people usually start there in opening in this field. Start then opening up to plants. Many of you already do. Okay, extend it to rivers. Extend it to your apartment, which is taking care of you. Feel it, and relate. And then you'll learn. You'll learn so much about what you're doing, about your choices, about why you're there, about how you're relating. And if you need to change your circumstances, then all these beings around you will help you. You can ask, okay, home that I'm supposed to be in, please connect with me now. I need to know. I need to hear from you. And boom, there it comes. You look down at the newspaper or you look at the computer and there's the ad with that home that seems to appear on both pages at the same time.
I love it. This is like such a rich, expansive conversation. And I'm so grateful, Penelope, for you sharing your perspective with us on this today. And I know that so many people are going to want more Penelope, and you've got a wonderful free gift, Millennial Messages for Humankind. Do you want to tell people about that? We do have a button right here on this page for people to go and directly sign up to receive that from you. But what can you tell us about it?
Well, the animals are giving us a tremendous amount of messages now about what's happening on the planet. And at the turn of the century, I was asked to communicate with animals if they had a millennial message. And those messages are so universal and so big. That's why I wanted to share them with people now, because we're going to be bringing out more and more of the messages of other beings about how we can handle what we've created here.
Well, luckily, we're in relation with all of life, all of everything, and we've got some options for that I hope will help lead us forward into a more harmonious future. for now, I'm having a more harmonious day just because I get to hang out with you for a little while and think about and talk about all these things. And I'm really looking forward to connecting with you at our bonus interview, how to communicate with all life. Like, how do we do this? Is there stuff we can do? And if anybody in our audience would like to join me for that conversation with Penelope, you can do that by purchasing your all access pass. You get lifetime access to all of the main interviews in the summit, all the bonus interviews in the summit, and the price does go up when the summit ends. So act now to get the best value and get more of Penelope Smith. And for now, I just want to say, Penelope, thank you so much for all that you've done for humanity, for animal kind, for the planet, for the field of animal communication, and especially thank you for sharing yourself with us today.
Thank you, Kara.
Thanks, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Come on over to the Facebook group and let us know what you thought about Penelope's talk today. I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everybody.